Hi everyone, this is Elias Martin from CollectingJapanesePrints.com. Welcome to Woodblock Wednesday, where every Wednesday we get together and discuss Japanese woodblock prints, paintings, culture, and history. And today I wanted to actually touch base on all of those topics. Today's print will be an ukiyo-e print, and I'm going to discuss a little bit about a character in Japanese history that it was really interesting. He's a very fascinating person who I recommend for all of you to read. So I'm going to walk over to the table where the prints are, and I could, sort of make reference to the print, and then I'll just switch over. But the print I'm going to show is a Kuniyoshi print, and Kuniyoshi was an ukiyo-e artist who did portraits, did comical prints, did landscapes, and in this particular design, it belongs to a series of prints he produced on the monk Nichiren. And Nichiren was the founder of a particular sect of Buddhism in Japan. It's kind of known as Kamakura Buddhism, or different kinds of names for it, but he basically lived during the Middle Ages in Japan, at a time when basically the shogunate was starting to take power over the country. And at this time, there was a lot of fighting within the country, and Nichiren was interesting because he came at the right time, actually, quite frankly, because his philosophy of Buddhism stressed that enlightenment or freedom from suffering, or the circle of life, the circle of suffering within life and death, can be released, or you could attain enlightenment or nirvana within your particular incarnation, which means your salvation was at hand. It could happen anytime within your lifetime. You don't have to strive to do better in this life to go to the next life and to go to the next life. You can attain enlightenment. And so that kind of Buddhism was really interesting. It was radical in some ways because it stressed on a particular way of being or living or engaging in the world right now. And so it's kind of an interesting idea when we reflect on what's going on in our world today, what we can do as human beings to relate to our society and make a difference in some way. And, so he was very outspoken about these things. And he was also, because he was outspoken, he angered other members of his Buddhist community, as well as the people that were seizing power in Japan. So the shogun was the sort of the warlord, the king, or not the king, but the head sort of warlord, and then there was these smaller, warlords underneath him. And, so basically they were all sort of not really for his type of Buddhism, and he caused a lot of issues. And I won't go into all the stories, but he's considered, for some, a saint, or at least a elevated teacher. And, Kuniyoshi in his time produced a series of prints celebrating his life and some of his accomplishments or scenes from his life. And this particular print refers to one moment in his life. So without further ado, let's look at the table and have a look at the print. So, the lighting in here isn't great because it's a very cloudy day in Chicago, and it's raining, and it's kind of dark in this room, and I have all the lights on right now. So you'll just have to bear with me if the light is on the dim side. But in this particular design, we have Nichiren walking across the snow. He was basically kicked out, and he's basically leaving the village where he was exiled from, and the village hugs this coastline, and this mountain kind of leads up to where Nichiren must go, and it's very dramatic. This design is really dramatic. It's full of emotion, and all of these components in the design really sort of echo the story. And so you could see in the background this really interesting foggy snowy background. You don't really see the horizon in this design. And of course, again, the village being just at the edge of the coast, hugging this mountain, almost as if it's going to slip away into the ocean. And then there's this steep walk up into the wilderness for the monk. And so all of this is supposed to sort of echo the austere and rugged conditions of the environment. The snow coming down, his stance, you could almost even feel that wind howling up against him, which leads into the village. And this particular impression, or this design, was very popular in Kuniyoshi's time, and it was reproduced many times. I don't know how many versions of this print exist, but today, one of the things that was always fun to do with prints, particularly ukiyo-e prints, is to compare one's impression to other impressions known in other museums or other collections. And so today, I have two books set out. This particular book, I'll just show you the cover really quick. It's Heroes and Ghosts. It's a great book that I recommend. Very high quality in terms of the paper and the images that are reproduced. Also, the information is excellent. And in this book, we have a very different impression. And here I'm going to bring over the woodblock print, and you could see there's some differences. And the first difference, which is probably the most noticeable, is that in the background here, it's mostly white. In my impression, you see this sort of brownish gray mountainside with the bokashi, that dark gradation of that dark that goes into light. And in this impression, I think that it suggests how steep of an incline up the figure or Nichiren must walk up there. It echoes or even strengthens the harsh conditions of the walk. And in this design, it all being white, it's actually quite beautiful. But I think you lose a sense of that drama, that steep incline up. So it's kind of interesting. And in this impression, also the color of his, like, it looks like a bag or something. In the back here, it is closer to the color of his robes, where here you see the difference in color. And it's interesting, the change in coloration and why each publisher made those changes. But it's kind of fun to just see how different they could be. Now over here in the village, you see a lot more gray, some beige or browns. Here you have some grays, but also some browns. So the coloration is, again, slightly different, and it's consistent with the coloration in some ways with the mountain. So we have here the information in the margin, the title, the publisher information, the artist's signature is here. Here is his seal. It's also on my print, but it's a bit fuzzy. It's slightly faded, I would say. Or at the very least, the color is kind of orangey, and it blends in really well with the mountains. So you don't really see it as well there. Now, I'm going to bring this print over to another book Now, this is actually one of my favorite Kuniyoshi references. It's a Japanese reference, and it just simply says Kuniyoshi prints. And it's basically an exhibition catalog of Kuniyoshi prints. This book came out a few years ago, and I like this book because it also shows different states. And in here, you could see there's this state with a strong horizontal line here. These two impressions lack it. And, short history about this print. There's been some back and forth by different scholars about which impression is the earliest or the first state. There's always that question when you're considering ukiyo-e prints, and everyone has an opinion. On this particular design, there isn't a consensus on it, which is actually kind of unusual and actually kind of fun, because usually there's this one scholar that comes in and says, okay, this is the first state, has a good explanation, and most people agree, and then move on. In this case, there's so many variations, and there's so many variations in the earlier points of production that it's actually kind of hard to tell. In other cases, because if you see a dramatic change, it's usually done a bit later. You could see the wear of the blocks more with each change. But so yeah, okay. I just had a little comment which I'll address. Hi, Ian, and he raises a good point, and so I'll bring that up. But just to finish this thought, in this case, this looks really early, but there are other very early impressions without the horizon line. So at the end of the day, the question is what's early, what's not early. And here, it's not really about that. It's about what aesthetically makes more sense for you. What do you think is more pleasing? Do you like the horizon line, or do you like the sort of the fuzziness where the horizon line is gone? Personally, I like this version, or the version that I have here, because it's more dramatic. It kind of creates sort of that sense of this really strong snowstorm that's coming in, and you just don't see the horizon at all. And we've all experienced, well, a lot of us have experienced being in snowstorms. I have, since I live in Chicago, and you do get a sense of being lost sometimes when you're in the middle of a really strong snowfall. And so in this design, you get that effect on these two particular versions, though I think this is really nice as well. And then also here, all three have a similar coloration in terms of the robes. They're very, very similar, and similar to the one that I previously pointed out. But the houses here are a bit different. This one looks a little bit more like mine. This one's a little bit different, and again here. And what we've seen here, all four, these three, this one here, are very different from my impression, in the sense that the mountain is not white, but kind of it's brown, which is interesting. And it only adds yet another example of how this print was executed. Now, Ian, a friend of mine, and also my intern, who's fantastic, he commented and suggested that the depiction of the monk ascending the mountain side implies his impending death or enlightenment. That is a question. And, it does very much foreshadow that for later in his life. But what I think is really interesting is Kuniyoshi is a master at producing a dramatic scene within a design. And without much action, there's no fight, there's no real conflict in this design. And it's really more about Nichiren walking up the slope of this sort of mountainside and battling the elements. But it also sort of shows his purposeness. That's a word. His being very much centered in each moment. You see these steps that he leaves, they're very deliberate. And in his type of Buddhism, it's a Buddhism that's engaged. It's engaged in the world, because enlightenment is possibly available at any given moment. He is walking up that incline. And in every moment, he's embodying his teachings. And the drum of this design only serves to anchor that. I think it's one of Kuniyoshi's most successful designs, particularly in this series. A lot of people love snow scenes, and this actually, I think, just transcends beyond being a beautiful snow scene to something even more than that. So now I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to zoom in so you could look at the print. As I'm showing you the print, there is some very subtle mica at the very top of the print. I'm going to try to hold the paper at an angle. You may not be able to see it in this light, but that's always a nice thing to see. It's a deluxe edition. You see mica or very wonderful embossing. That's always signs that, you know, that the printers added a little extra. There's some impressions that lack it. So, I mean, a lot of people think, you know, when you see mica or these other wonderful printing embellishments, that these impressions are a little deluxe. And I'm going to flip the print over. It's not something everyone gets to see all the time, but this is what the print looks like on the verso. And because it's a woodblock print, you should expect to see the bleed through come through the paper. Edo period paper is so absorbent, but it's also very strong. So it's the ideal type of paper to actually use for printing, because the actual printing is very forceful or vigorous, circular sort of forces onto the back sheet of the paper. So the color sort of bleeds through to the back. It's really nice to see. You could also see the conditions fantastic. There's no tape, there's no centerfold. And, you know, for collectors who are considering buying prints of this period, there's certain things you should always look for. One, prints of this format often have a centerfold right across the center. And you will see in this particular case, here's a centerfold here. And the reason for a centerfold is that these prints were often mounted as in albums, and these Japanese style accordion albums folded a certain way where the print was actually then folded in onto itself and created that crease down the center. They were later removed, and when they were removed, what remains is the centerfold, which is, you know, unfortunate. Sometimes you could address the centerfold where you could diminish the line's visibility, but you can never remove it. And so in this case, in this particular impression that's in a museum, you clearly see that centerfold and then the soiling across it. Here, no centerfold, as well as the other examples, is nice and clean. But this impression is quite nice. And again, other things that you can tell that make this condition of this print excellent is there's no backing sheet, which reveals that it probably was never bound in an album because there's no centerfold. Clearly, that's one sign that it wasn't. But sometimes the albums were big enough to accommodate a full sheet without folding it. And you would then have this print attached to the original backing, and that's not there. and there are no tape stains or tape remnants. So it's a really nice, clean print, which is always wonderful to see when a print is this old. It's very rare to find Kuniyoshi prints, particularly of these important designs in this this is museum quality condition. So I'm going to zoom in on a couple of prints in the book so you can kind of see the difference. And again, if you don't know anything about Nichiren, I encourage all of you to read up on him, his life. He had a very interesting life, and then his philosophy, or the Buddhist idea that enlightenment or salvation is attainable in one's lifetime, which is really interesting, radical, liberating thought, and that one must actively engage in the world with one's beliefs in order to change it and change themselves. And that's what got him in trouble. I mean, he wasn't a quiet guy. When there was problems, corruption, he put truth to power, and he spoke truth to power, and he put his actions first, embodying his beliefs. So, how many of us can do that? And of course, he suffered the consequences. He was exiled a couple times in his life, this scene being one of them. And then there was, I think, 2 or 3 attempts on his life. It's really interesting story. So I'd encourage all of you to read up on him, and then also look at the other Kuniyoshi prints in the series. There's some other really fantastic designs that are considered some of his most important designs. So one of the last things I'll leave with you, because, in 2 books, I was able to show you 4 impressions of this design. And that just should tell you how important and how successful this design was in Kuniyoshi's time. And so, which one do you like the most? Let me know. Put them in the comments. I will say that this particular print will be on my website in my next exhibition that's coming up in a couple months. Hopefully in a month and a half, when the coast seems relatively clear. I definitely don't want to conduct business in this COVID infested environment, and I want everyone to stay safe and not necessarily worry about shipping or buying or anything else. But again, I just want to encourage all of you to sort of read up on things and learn about Japanese history, Japanese art. I hope my videos are inspiring you to do that. And of course, there's a lot more to this print. There's a lot more to his story. So I encourage all of you to have to look and just sort of read on that as well. So I'm just going to zoom in one last time. So I want to thank all of you for joining me once again on Woodblock Wednesday. If you're interested in learning more about Japanese prints, please visit my website, collectingjapaneseprints.com. I have books at a bookstore. I have a lot of prints, and even the ones that are not for sale. There's a lot of information in each entry. We spend a lot of time researching and writing about each print. So there's a lot there. Even if you're not interested in buying anything, I want to encourage you to visit the website. Hopefully you will learn something new. And then, if there are any things you'd like to see in the future for Woodblock Wednesday, feel free to comment below in the video, or send me a private message. I'm already collecting some video topics or ideas for the future. One that I'm definitely going to do in the near future is a question and answer with all of you about collecting, maybe some pitfalls or some advice. I could see that the advice videos that I've done in the past have been the most successful. I've gotten the most responses, the most views on those. And so I'm definitely going to, do another video with advice on how to go ahead and what prints to buy, particularly when you're collecting prints that are 100+ years old, there's all these issues that you need to take into account, particularly condition, impression, all of that. And so I'll address that in the future. But for now, I want to thank you again for joining me. And I look forward to seeing you next week on Woodblock Wednesday. See you then.